Hello, all. Hope you're having a great day today. So, we're finishing up our conversation in chapter 4 where we're talking more about organizational change. So, here we go. So, organizational structure designates formal reporting relationships. It identifies the grouping together of individuals into departments and includes the design of systems to ensure effective communication, coordination, and integration of efforts across departments. When addressing the topic of organizational structure, we usually refer to formal organizations, which is what we typically see when we examine an organizational chart. In Figure 4.1 earlier in the chapter is an example of a formal organizational chart for a fictitious professional baseball organization. Note, however, that every organization also has an informal dimension. Formal and informal relationships operate simultaneously within a sport organization, with any organization. Informal relationships among employees can take many forms, such as employees who have lunch together on a regular basis and discuss everything from sports to company politics. Informal relationships are not officially acknowledged in the structure of the organization, but are likely to compete with or support the formal organization. Although the formal organization cannot control informal relationships, encouraging a positive organizational culture, the topic discussed in this chapter will increase the likelihood of mutual support. Organizational theorists generally agree on 3 dimensions of structure. Number 1 is specialization. Next is formalization and standardization and centralization. The first structural dimension of specialization concerns the division of labor, which is the extent to which tasks and duties are divided into separate roles. According to Daft in 2016, when specialization is high, employees carry out a limited range of tasks and duties. And when specialization is low, individual employees carry out a wide range of tasks. The dimension of specialization is tied to the concept of complexity. There are 3 levels of complexity: vertical, horizontal, and spatial. Vertical complexity is evidenced by the number of levels that exist between the top executive in the organization, such as president or chief executive officer, and the lowest positions and units in the hierarchy, such as your support positions and departments. The more levels there are, the more vertically complex the organization is. The second structural dimension includes both formalization and standardization. These terms are used interchangeably because high levels of formalization result in standardization. Formalization refers to the amount of written documentation in the organization. This includes items such as job descriptions, policies, procedures, and regulations, as well as employee records of performance. This documentation is often used to control employees' behaviors and activities. As a result, a high degree of formalization leads to a high degree of standardization. Because employees who face similar situations will be expected to act in a similar fashion. Centralization is the third dimension of organizational structure. This concept refers to the hierarchical levels of individuals in the organization who have authority to make decisions. When leaders and managers at the top of the hierarchy handle the decision-making activities, the organization is centralized. When decision-making is delegated to levels throughout the organization is decentralized. Typically, organizations are not completely centralized or decentralized. Some decisions may be centralized, such as hiring and firing of employees, establishing the strategic direction of the organization, whereas others may be decentralized, such as purchasing of organizational supplies, marketing strategies for products and services. The following factors affect whether decisions are centralized or decentralized: the cost and organizational resources of the decision to the sport organization. The greater the cost, the more centralized the decision will be. The timing, how much time a sport manager has to make the decision. The more urgent the decision, the more decentralized it will be. The qualifications of employees. The greater the number of expert employees involved throughout the sport organization, the more decentralized the decision will be. They are interrelated. For example, high levels of specialization are typically associated with high levels of formalization and standardization. In other words, the greater number of roles in the organization, the more formalized and standardized the organization will be. The more job descriptions, more policies and procedures. Likewise, when an organization has a small number of roles, formalization and standardization will be low. The relationship between formalization and standardization and centralization is not as easy to predict. Research in organizational theory has not demonstrated a consistent relationship between the two dimensions. Further, the relationship between specialization and centralization is not always consistent. In situations where specialization is high and thus where roles, tasks, and duties within the organization are narrowly defined, one would expect decentralization of decision making. With low levels of specialization, one would expect centralization of decision making within the organization. Daft in 2016 defined organizational design as the features and traits of an organization that allow it to undertake activities and achieve objectives. Consider organizational design as the structural configurations that leaders use to arrange an organization's activities and operations so it can reach its goals. Henry Bitzberg, here depicted here, and conducted extensive work on organizational design. In a 1979 study, Bitzberg outlined different design configurations for various types of organizations based on their nature of their operations. A sporting goods organization in the business of manufacturing running shoes will be designed differently from a sport marketing agency or an event management business. Bitzberg based his design on the interplay among 5 major parts of the organization, which have been simplified as follows: top management, which is the leadership within the organization; the middle management, the managers who are between the leadership of the organization and the employees who are directly involved with the production of goods and services; the technical core, the group of employees responsible for producing goods and services; and administrative support staff, the employees who provide a support function in the organization; technical support staff, the employees who provide technical and technological support to assist in the production of goods and services and introduce innovative practices to enhance existing goods and services or create new ones. Based on the relevance and importance of these 5 parts of the organization, various designs are proposed. Bitzberg identified several designs, among them the simple structure, the machine bureaucracy, and the professional bureaucracy. Subsequently, new designs have been added to reflect emerging realities for organizations. Among these new designs are entrepreneurial, innovative, missionary, and political designs. The simple structure is typically a suitable design for small organizations that have only 2 parts: top management and the technical core. Simple structures are characterized by low levels of specialization and standardization and high levels of centralization. A small sports club that operates at the local level might have a simple structure. The machine bureaucracy is appropriate for sporting good manufacturers that have high levels of specialization, standardization, and centralization. And the machine bureaucracy design, all parts of the organization identified by Bitzberg are important: top management, middle management, technical core, administrative support staff, and technical support staff. The professional bureaucracy is characterized by an important technical core and administrative support staff, along with a limited technical support staff, middle management, and top management. This design would be appropriate for national sport organizations in which professionals, coaches, sports psychologists, professional administrators are responsible for the products or services. Decentralization and high levels of specialization and standardization are also characteristics of this design. Entrepreneurial organizations have a simple design. With a minimal staff, the organization initially has little need for specialization and standardization because the top of the organization coordinates much of the work. As outlined in Sack and Nadim, Starter Corporation, a licensed sport apparel business now owned by Nike, was initially structured as an entrepreneurial organization. Innovative designs also allow greater flexibility than the bureaucratic designs while providing decentralization not found in entrepreneurial organizations. Organizations featuring an innovative design emphasize a climate of creativity for the experts responsible for developing the product or the service. As a result, the power in the organization resides in the experts, who might be allowed to work in the creative team or on special products. A marketing agency or ad agency with several accounts may exhibit an innovative design. A missionary design is designed around its ideology. After employees become indoctrinated into the organization and identify strongly with the organization's ideology, they have the freedom to make decisions. In her research of organizational designs of organizing committees for the Olympic Games, Theodorakis found evidence of this missionary design. Organizations with political designs are extremely flexible. They have no definite mechanisms of coordination. Typically, temporary organizations use this design so they can address challenging transitions. An organization bidding to host a major sport event such as World Cup or International Championship, for example, might be designed as a political organization because it addresses needs to secure resources such as funding, facilities, volunteers, and support, in the hopes of hosting an event. Table 4.1 outlines the structural profiles of Mitzberg's organizational designs. And you can see, depending upon the structure, as to whether it was very specialized or the formalization and the standardization as well as centralization. In organizational size affects our organizational structure. So the number of employees, the number of organizational locations, the value of organizational assets, the sales volume, and number of clients all are taken into account with organizational size. Now, organizational change is the process by which leaders of organizations adopt new ideas and behaviors to enhance their operations, products, services, and programs. To remain competitive, relevant, and viable, organizations constantly undergo change. Sometimes organizational change involves innovation or a new way of doing things. Innovation leads to a new or improved product or service or processes that enable organizations to operate more efficiently and effectively. We'll talk about the key frameworks of organization and change in this next slide. So change. One framework of organization change is the organizational life cycle, or the model of organizational growth. This framework is an adaptation of Greiner's work in 1972 on the various stages of evolution and revolution that an organization undertakes as it grows, and the work of Quinn and Cameron on the life cycle of an organization. The entrepreneurial stage is based on the vision of the founder of the organization. The founder is investing his or her energies in all aspects of the organization: the management, technical production, marketing, delivery of products or services, to ensure that the organization survives and grows, as a catalyst for progression toward the next growth. In the next stage, the organization typically undergoes a crisis identified as need for leadership. During this crisis, the founder becomes overwhelmed with the quantity of work involved and with the increasing responsibilities that he or she holds within the organization. As a result, the founder who created the organization needs help. Collectivity. In this stage, the leadership crisis has been addressed. The organization is now developing clear roles, goals, and establishing its direction. Functional areas, departments, and a hierarchy of authority are created to help divide and assign the work to newly hired employees. Also, formal communication mechanisms are being developed to help in the coordination of the work to be achieved and to address the rapid growth. For progression into the next stage, the organization of the collectivity stage will go through a crisis termed need for delegation with control. During this crisis, lower-level employees are limited in their ability to make decisions autonomously. As they gain experience and expertise in their functional areas, they become increasingly frustrated with the strong top-down leadership. During this crisis, leaders develop coordination and control mechanisms within the organization and provide employees with some level of autonomy and decision-making power. The formalization stage. At this stage, rules and procedures are developed. Job descriptions are created. Communication becomes more formal. Top management executives invest their time in strategic planning and allow middle management the responsibility of managing operations. Decentralized units may be created and incentive programs for managers may be introduced to enhance the effectiveness of the organization. As the organization increases its level of formalization and standardization, the crisis of too much red tape will surface. With systems and high levels of formalization in place, middle management may begin to experience some constraints in their ability to do their work with the organization. Specifically, too much bureaucracy may paralyze employees and stifle innovation. The organization is large and complex and will require adjustments to reach the next stage. The elaboration stage. This is to address the increasing red tape. Leaders and managers within the organization undertake collaboration and teamwork. This collaboration across different hierarchical levels, departments or divisions and functions, leaders, managers, and employees work together to solve problems. During this stage, formal systems may be simplified in favor of more collaboration among leaders, managers, and employees. As the organization matures, it may experience the need for revitalization. As the organization's alignment within its environment becomes askew, a streamlining of operations may be necessary for the organization to respond better to a changing environment. Also, innovations provide the organization with new energy and spirit. Another framework for studying organizational change is the contextualist approach developed by Pettigrew in 1987 and 1999. This approach acknowledges that change does not take place in isolation or in a brief period of time. Understanding change is important, but it must be accomplished over the long term by considering three elements: content, context, and process. To acquire a full understanding of change, one must first examine the content of change, which is best done by determining what has changed. The next element of Pettigrew's framework is the context of change. The focus is on determining why the change occurred. Context includes two sections, the inner context and the outer context. Inner context consists of internal elements at play within organizations such as strategy, culture, and the structure of organizations. Outer context refers to general political environment and was useful in understanding the challenges related to the implementation of innovations in the sports sector. Theobald and Babiak also used Pettigrew's framework to investigate changes in Canada's sports system. They were specifically interested in examining how and why the Canadian sports system changed to accommodate greater involvement from athletes. They found that increased representation by athletes on decision-making boards of sport organizations, greater funding of athletes, the creation of national sport training centers, and the creation of a forum for athletes to resolve conflicts between themselves and sport organizations or coaches all contributed to an athlete-centered sports system. The authors were able to understand the nature of the change that occurred in light of the context in which Canada's sports system operated and the leadership role assumed by change agents to bring about the adoption of more athlete-centered change in the sports system. Organization change often involves innovation. Discovering new ways of doing things can lead to growth and differentiation and thus strategic renewal. Different types of innovation include product and process innovations. Product innovations relate to the creation of new product designs or the development of new products. Examples of product innovations in sport include the Street and Smith Sports Business Journal and motion responsive sportswear. Process innovations improve the efficiency or effectiveness of organizational processes. Patagonia's Common Threads apparel recycling program is an example of a process innovation. In sport, process innovations may relate to the game, recruiting, conditioning, and strategy of play, or the entertainment and viewership experience in person, such as the stadium, arena, and ballpark. and at home, television and streaming. Yoshida and colleagues found that sport event innovativeness in terms of both product and process affects consumer behavior. The greater consumers' perception of the innovativeness of the sport event, the more likely they are to plan to attend in the future. Innovations can also be radical or incremental. Radical innovations break unwritten industry rules and are often due to technological change. These innovations are highly disruptive and can transform an organization or industry. Smart technology, for example, has significantly altered the sport business landscape. Incremental innovations, by comparison, are small and evolutionary, but can add value and have competitive advantage. Mikasa Sport developed an indoor volleyball with 8 rather than the usual 18 panels to improve players' control. Mikasa's volleyballs become the official volleyball for many leagues and competitions, including all Fédération Internationale de Volleyball worldwide competitions and the 2012 London Olympic and Paralympic Games. In their study of innovation in community sport organizations, Hober and colleagues found that incremental innovations such as the adoption of social responsibility initiatives and new organizational models were more common than radical innovations. There are a variety of different sources of innovation. Drucker in 2002 outlined some ways that innovation emerges. For example, new ways of doing things can arise accidentally or unexpectedly. The current curved design of hockey sticks was discovered during a Chicago Blackhawk practice in the early 1960s when forward Stan Mikita accidentally broke his stick. Mikita realized the slightly bent stick made the puck move through the air more effectively. Another source of innovation is incongruity, which is the difference between reality as it actually is and reality as it is assumed to be. For example, clap skates were around for a long time but were not considered serious until an Olympic skater noticed junior skaters wearing them. Innovations can also come from process needs. Moneyball player analytics were developed to facilitate the formation of a winning baseball team, particularly under financial resource restrictions. Other sources of innovation include industry, market, and demographic changes and new knowledge. Social media and technology networking platforms such as social networking applications, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Snapchat, blogs, social tagging, wikis, microblogs, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and augmented reality are being adopted by sport organizations at a rapid rate. These new technologies have the potential to advance organizational performance and effectiveness and improve organizational processes, efficiencies in areas such as cost reduction, enhanced customer relations, and increased access to information accessibility. Communication through social media facilitates the exchange of a broader scope and type of information and sometimes bypasses formal structures and channels. It may also influence communication of thoughts and ideas or knowledge management, affect values, and possibly shape organizational structure. Treem and Leonardi explored how new media differ from other forms of traditional computer-mediated communication, such as email and teleconferencing. They argue that social media communication benefits organization because it affords visibility, persistence, editability, and association. The use of social media in organizations may influence and alter knowledge sharing, socialization, formal and informal connection. Empower processes in organizations. Treem and Leonardi identified 3 types of information or actions that are made visible through the use of social media in organizations: work behavior, meta-knowledge, and organizational activity streams. For example, information about work behavior becomes more readily accessible and easier to find and is shared more easily across organizational boundaries. The visibility of social media provides meta-knowledge and data about people who work for the organization. They share information about their skills and interests. It also allows employees to orient themselves appropriately in the company because they are informed about what is happening around them. The information shared on social media platforms is also persistent. That is, it does not disappear after a user has logged off. Like instant messaging, or video conferencing. This may foster the development of common ground in communication settings and in the transmission of complex ideas. Finally, social media allows for more extensive associations across various levels of organizational structure, thereby creating social capital and building community and bridges between employees. Ultimately, social media as a technological infrastructure in organizations structure supports and changes the way people communicate and collaborate. The implications of social media for organizational practices have not yet been broadly explored. For example, the effects of social media on organizational structure or culture are areas that are ripe for investigation. In sport organizations, social media is being used to communicate with external consumers. Critical thinking is important in sport organizations. As introduced in Chapter 1, sport leaders, managers, and employees with critical thinking skills are better able to solve problems, make informed decisions, and develop comprehensive plans and strategies for the organization. Given the constant flux in the environment, sport managers must adopt a critical thinking approach whereby they can analyze and evaluate information, facts, evidence, assumptions, ideas, and implications. Numerous sport management scholars have expounded on the importance of developing critical thinking skills. For instance, Boucher in 1998 explained that a true measure of whether sport management graduates are truly prepared is not the courses listed on the transcript, but rather have they been educated to think intelligently and make decisions about issues that will face the dynamic world of managing a sport enterprise. Similarly, Harris in 1993 urged sport management educators to give greater emphasis to student development of critical and reflective competencies. She surmised that such an emphasis would prepare professionals who would be able to free themselves from traditional ways of identifying and solving problems and to look at problems from new perspectives. In the same vein, Edwards suggested that critical reflection should receive more attention than it currently receives in sport management so that we can find new, less oppressive, and more just ways of creating and managing sport. Furthermore, Frisbee in 2005 proposed that sport management educators become versed in critical social science theories so they can help students become strong critical thinkers who will make contributions to society. The clear implications of all these suggestions is that as the managers of the future, you will need exceptional thinking skills to make the necessary decisions to deal effectively and responsibly with the myriad challenges that you will encounter. For example, sport managers will have to make difficult decisions as they address issues regarding where limited funds are invested in high-performance sport or for sport for all. Thibault in 2009 applied critical thinking to her analysis of globalization in sport and encouraged academics and practitioners to consider the inconvenient truths of globalization for those without power. This type of critical perspective may allow for different and more effective and appropriate organizational decisions to be made. So here are a few questions that you might consider reviewing before the test. How would you define the term organization, and what are 3 types of sport organizations? Select one sport organization. How would you describe its structure using the structural dimensions featured in the chapter? In what ways can some organizational cultures be positive for a sport organization, and what other ways can cultures be negative for a sport organization? So in summary, the organizational theory topics covered in this chapter: management concepts, the organizational environment, effectiveness, structure and design, strategy, culture, and change are all important to consider and monitor. Left unchecked, problems in these areas can reduce the effectiveness of a sport organization and ultimately lead to its demise. Note that these topics are interrelated. For example, the structure and design of the sport organization may affect or be affected by the culture of that organization. Similarly, the ability to develop and implement a strategy or to cope with change may affect or be affected by the structure and design of the sport organization. These interrelationships take on even more complexity considering the roles people play in the development and management of organizations in the sport industry. So the following chapter addresses the topic of people and their roles in organizations. Thanks for joining me today. I look forward to talking with you soon. You have a great day.